right, so this is the very first of its kind that we're doing. It's a podcast between myself and a very good friend of mine named Malorn. You may know him from Planetside 2. He was part of the SOE development team. I have known Malorn for over 20 years now, ever since Planetside 1. That's how far we go back. And I tend to very much value his input and the things he has to say. So, Malorn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. Yeah, I've been playing with bows for a very long time. Originally, just on the other side, I was one of the people who hated him and hated playing against him because he was effective. But eventually, I was like, what they're doing looks fun. I'm gonna give that a try, and I saw a completely different side of the game. Saw a completely different philosophy and way of playing and approaching games. It was both effective and fun, and pretty much been kind of friends ever since. And when PlanetSide 2 was a thing, that was the only group I really wanted to play with. And later I became a developer on the game and continued to value and use a lot of his feedback, which had led to some really positive changes. I don't really want to go too much into, but it was some good changes of the game that really made it on the whole better. But I spent about 2 years working on that game and getting some firsthand game design and seeing what it's like on the other side from being a fan and a player to a developer who then has to get the brunt of the player ire and the learn how the feedback is filtered and learn how changes actually happen. So that it's kind of once you've experienced that, it's very difficult to it's very difficult to look at a game the same way. And I really just don't look at games the same way anymore. I always have that lens that I think I can kind of understand where things come from and where they're going to go just from that experience.
Absolutely. And I very closely worked as well with Malorn and other members of SOE on Planetside 2. So I also have a bit of an insight into that. And he mentioned philosophy and looking at games a different way. And that's how I look at Star Citizen. Yes, it's a game in constant development. It's been in development for a very long time, as we all know. But it's always changing. And part of that is what interests me. It doesn't mean I like it is the way it is, right? But I do get interest from its development. And that's why a lot of the videos, if you guys watch the videos or even listen to the things I have to say or read what I have to say in the forums, I am looking at things from that developer point of view. And I'm always focusing on, well, is this fun? Is this good for the product, in my opinion? Is this good for balance? Are people going to enjoy this? And how is this game going to appeal to as many people as possible while also maintaining the integrity of the product? Meaning, we don't want to dumb it down and appeal to the lowest common denominator, but we also want to appeal to a group of people like your average audience. And one of the things I like to factor into when I think about games, I like to think about the amount of time you're putting into the game. And is it a good amount of time that you're putting into the game? The world is very different now than it was 10 years ago. And I feel like game development may not always understand that. And some people just don't have the time, they don't have the money or even the energy now to dedicate to a game 10 years ago that they do now, regardless of their age bracket, because it's not just an age thing. And I'm not going into politics, but people do have a lot less time now in general. And I look at, is my time right now being spent wisely, economically, and is it worth it?
Yeah, I would totally agree. I think things are definitely different, and you can see that even in games like World of Warcraft, where the whole approach and philosophy is very different between like Classic, which they've been re-releasing, and the current retail game, like just complete night and day in terms of philosophy on leveling up and getting items and how much time you have to take to do those things. Like in general, just the amount of time and the patience that people have has been decreasing, and so you see the design changes are going in that direction for pretty much every game that I've encountered.
Well, that's very important to mention that that doesn't always mean instant gratification. And I don't look at things from an instant gratification. I still consider myself to be a pretty hardcore player of games. I do put a lot of time into them, and I like to earn things in game. I like to put in the effort to get better. But there does come a point where I think certain things are a waste of time. And I feel like there's a lot of that in Star Citizen. There's probably a bit too much of that in Star Citizen. So I've been playing for over 3 years now, and my friend Malorn here just started pretty much this year, a few months ago, actually, I would say, a little bit after IAE. So as a relatively new player, Malorn, what is your genuine initial reaction as a new player with an above room temperature IQ?
Well, I mean, I actually tried to play the game really almost 2 summers ago, and I couldn't get out of the main city and just kind of got frustrated and gave up. And it took me another year before I kind of peaked at the game again. And then it was really kind of going into IAE that I started to really take a take a hard look at the game and try it again when I had a better PC capable of running it a bit better. And it's been a real learning experience for a lot of stuff, but my initial experience is that the new player experience is pretty horrible. Like they just really they start you out with like some teaching you the basics like food and drink and stuff, and I'm just reminded of like EverQuest of like food and drink and eating and stuff. It's like I step back in time 30 years for a game, and it's an interesting immersion, but I don't think it really adds anything to the game other than to make the world feel a little more lived in. But mostly it's just like a chore you have to deal with, and there's a pretty steep learning curve on really everything, just how things work, how to get from A to B, how to navigate. Like I'm really glad, really glad that they're fixing or changing the map and the star map navigation, because I there's so many times I take off from a station and I try to navigate to something, and it just won't even set the waypoint. Like, why does it set the waypoint? I've kind of figured out that it means that there's a celestial body or something, or a station in between myself and where I want to set my waypoint, and it just can't find a path. But it's it's got a lot of rough edges like that, and for someone walking in and playing the game, it feels more like a tech demo to me than it does a game. And to a certain extent, I think that's really what its purpose is. Like, I think the PU is effectively a tech demo where they're just seeing what concepts kind of work. It's not really necessarily meant to be fun. It's meant to be a place where you can try out different systems and see how they work together. But I think people would enjoy their time in the game a lot more if it was more fun, or more, where you could do things more quickly or more easily and more social with other people. I find it very hard to do things with other people in the game, because it's like you're constantly fighting the game's desire to not have you do that. Like, I want to hop with a buddy to get, gun a hurricane or something, or just run around and do something like that. It's like, okay, well, we're on different sides of the solar system. I got to go meet up with you. I got to take off from Area 18. Oh, I got to wait for the tram. I got to get there. Oh, wait, I forgot my space helmet on the armor back. Oh, hang on, I just, got to go buy one of those. And then we finally meet up and we take off or something. And then, we bumped into another ship that rammed us and blew up. And now we've got to go start all over again. Oh, wait, you're in Grimhex. I'm back at Area 18. Like, it's just trying to do something with other people is just like really difficult in the game. And it's just not fun. And a lot of times if something like that happens, I just don't really want to play anymore, and I want to go do something else. It's not going to feel like I wasted 30 minutes of my time just trying to do something to someone, only to have that just stopped cold, and then, my activity is just completely disrupted.
So yes, a lot of the things you said, I absolutely agree with, and I think this is a pretty good segue into a lot of the topics I'd like to talk about, which is accessibility. I I think a lot of the selling point for the game is that certain things are going to take time. And this is going back to meaningful time. And I do view certain things as meaningful time. We talk about eating and drinking. Eating and drinking, to me, in a game, have to have a purpose other than a chore. Now, in Star Citizen, eating and drinking is not important enough that you have to care about it, but it's there to, it's just more of a maintenance and an annoyance. Not often do I ever eat and drink in a session, but it happens so infrequently that I wonder, well, why is it even here? And I'm fine with that because I just don't care about it. I would rather it not be here, but it is there, so whatever. That's a minor gripe of mine. But you mentioned time and time it takes to do things. Now, getting into a tram is a waste of time, and riding a tram, it's fun for like the first time you do it, but other than that, I don't want to do it. And you get to the tram. So if you're logging into play, the first time, all right, you spawn in a hab, you get out of the hab, you go to the tram, you ride the tram, you go to the ASOP, you get the ASOP, you call the ship, you go to orbit. Now you're finally playing the game. The first time you do that, that's probably pretty impressive if you're a new player. And if you start doing that every single session, it's going to grate on you, and it's going to be viewed as an obstacle instead of a feature. And Star Citizen has way too many obstacles for fun, in my opinion. Transit and transportation can be fun, but it has to be meaningful. An example of fun transportation that I can give you from a couple different games would be when you're riding a battle in squad and you're at the back of a truck and you deploy with your squad and you go and fight for the rest of the match. Or in Planetside 1 or 2, where you're riding a dropship from the starting point, the load up point, to the drop off point. That's also fun. And one final example that people can probably relate to is Arma, when you're in a Blackhawk and you're flying out to a mission location. That's immersive and fun transit and transportation time that I think is okay. Star Citizen has very little of that, and it has an overabundance of tedium just to play the game.
I would totally agree with that. I think that something so on the positive side. I think the quantum travel is actually pretty cool, and I think that the time it takes just to move around the solar system is it kind of feels like initially my gut reaction when I first started playing is like it felt like it takes forever. But I also started flying faster ships like a Corsair pretty fast. Like it gets around pretty quickly. Same thing with like a C2 and some other of the larger ships. It seems kind of unusual to me that in this game, the larger the ship, the better the quantum drive and the faster it goes, whereas the small ships tend to be the really slower ones or don't have the fuel to really go very far. But the time on a faster ship feels about right to me. Now, maybe the slower ships could be faster, and maybe the really faster could be a little bit faster. But that time travel, it feels okay. Like, it doesn't feel too bad to me. But having to do it all the time, or, having to do that just to get back to wherever I was when I was, had an unfortunate accident, like I took my helmet off or whatever, and forgot when I took my helmet off to eat and forgot to put it back on before going out in space, stuff like that. And then it's so very easy to die accidentally in Star Citizen, and it's very punishing when that happens.
It is, and I'm glad you mentioned quantum travel. So quantum travel, before anybody has a conniption, I think is something important, and it's important because we have quantum interdiction. Without quantum travel, we can't have quantum interdiction, which is an entire play style. So quantum travel has to be there, and there has to be an element of time to it. So the time doesn't bother me too much. It's the time,
same.
like you said, with some of the smaller ones. I think quantum travel in general might be an idea from a previous time because, and people can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe they're shrinking the size of Pyro. And you see a lot of the newer ships having bigger fuel tanks and better quantum drives. It makes me think that they maybe want to shrink it down a little bit because I think there was a time when quantum travel had an idea of how it was going to play out versus how it actually is playing out in reality. And a lot of that is, I call it like desire paths, which was something that somebody pointed out to me one time. Party Squid pointed out to me this philosophy of desire path. But basically what it is if you're going to the park, you walk around the park, you have a sidewalk, but you see a path that everybody walks in the grass that is walked out. And it's the shortest way there. So people take that path and it becomes a desire path. So you as the foundation or developer, you put down a framework that you want people to follow, and then you find that your players are going to do something else entirely different. And I think you're seeing that a lot with quantum travel. People are they're just specifically using certain ships, or they're simply staying in certain areas, or they're adjusting the gameplay certain ways to avoid quantum travel, the excessive ones anyway. Mm-hmm. I know going from a Grimhex on a size 1 Atlas, which is you needed pretty much an Atlas on a size 1 for most of the older ships to actually get over to Microtech. It's about 8.5, almost 9-minute jump. All I'm doing then is getting up and going AFK, and that's not really very fun.
Yeah, and like I base all of everything I do, I base out of the Hurston L1 station because it has all the amenities I need, but also because it's kind of centrally located to every other place in the system that if I want to go somewhere from that location, that's pretty much the shortest average distance that I could go for anything. And that's also me mitigating the quantum travel. Like, I kind of like Microtech a little bit better, but I don't want to base out of there because it's just so much further from all the other places of interest.
System. That's how I feel. Her 01 tends to be my lawful go-to because of that as well, because you're kind of in the center of everything. And the one thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on, and we've been talking about this a lot, but we're talking about time and investment, and we've kind of kicked this idea around, and it's a big one. We've been talking about respawn points. And respawn points, I want to jump right into it pretty early in the video here, is because it's something I've been harping on quite a lot. And Malorn and I have been talking about it quite a lot for many, many weeks and months on end here. And we talk about it because we view this as probably the biggest challenge that Star Citizen is facing. And this does factor into the time element, but it's also the accessibility element and the whole game in general. Any game you play, you have to have a foundation of respawn points. And the current respawn points just don't work because there are none. And we've talked about how what is a player's first thing they want to do? All right, well, a player, if you assume you're knowing, let's assume you know what the hell you're doing, right? You want to get up, get out of the planet, and get to a station immediately to bind there because it gets you into the game quicker because you don't have to ride the trains anymore, and it's the quickest way into Quantum, and getting into Quantum is getting into the game, basically. And then when you're on a station, what are you doing on a station? I said this before in a Discord. The only purpose of the station is to get the hell off it as fast as possible. That's how I view stations, is to get off of them. And right there, and how this ties into respawns, the players are going there because it presents the most accessible respawn and the most convenient respawn. But it's also the only respawn in the game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think your analogy of get the hell off the station is pretty accurate. It's basically like an action RPG. And what I think some people don't really think about when it comes to gameplay and interaction is that while it may be really cool to have these cities like Area 18 and Hurston and Microtech, I mean, they look visually, they look fantastic. I mean, they're actually really cool. But there's no real player interaction in there. And they seem to have this design decision where you can't really see other players very well in that world. They're trying to blending in with NPCs. And I'm not sure what the purpose of that is, but I know that the effect of that is that I feel like I'm like the only person in a station or in Microtech. I can maybe identify if it's a player based on how they're moving, but don't really have any ways to interact with them and talk to them or really do anything with them. And it's mostly the global chat is where I could organize activities with somebody. And I really think just like the basic fundamental of the game is I want to sit in, I want to hop in for maybe an hour or so, maybe an hour or two, and I want to have some adventure in this cool world. And I think you just get lost in like the stations. I'm not interacting with anybody. I can't go out and do anything in the world, and you're just completely out of the world in that case. Like you're not content for anybody. You're not content to be shot at by pirates or PvPers. You're not generating resources or something for other people. You might as well not even be playing the game when you're inside the station or inside one of those other places.
Yes, and it's definitely a big deal now too because we don't have meshing or anything like that where we have larger servers. We only have 100 player servers per shard basically. So without an actual massive connected universe, those stations really are empty, and any player in those stations are, as you said, not actually providing content or fulfilling, any real useful role in an MMO game. And people aren't going to want like hearing like, oh, I'm not somebody's content. Calm your horses. Is that what people are saying? The point is that you're not really doing anything that interacts with the game world. You're sitting around. You might as well like being AFK in a city in another MMO game. And the NPCs, I guess the original design goal was to be unable to differentiate the difference between an NPC and a player. And okay, I get it, but it does have this effect of loneliness, at least for me, like you said, because I see NPCs, I just assume everything is an NPC unless they're standing by an ASOP terminal. And if they're standing by an ASOP terminal with gear on, I know it's a player, but I'm still not interacting with that guy. I couldn't care less. I don't know his name. I don't know who he is. I just don't care. And it's a very lonely feeling in a way, and that also adds to the mental effect of I just want to get the hell off the station and go play the real game. And that's one of the things. You could streamline the process of getting off the station, right? Let's say you respawn at the station. I'm not advocating for this, but I'm just using an example. You could respawn in your bed, run down, go to the ASOP, call your ship, run to the hangar. You could have a terminal in the hangar that has every single item on that station available to purchase. And you buy everything there, and you get your ship, and you're on your way. And it wouldn't make a difference. Because there's nothing in that station that matters. There's no reason why I would ever want to go to the food court. I wouldn't know if somebody's an NPC or a player or not. What if I did want to go socialize? What if there was like a socialized area? I'm not going to walk up to every NPC and use in-game voice chat to try and say, hey, are you real? It's ridiculous. Nobody's going to do that. It almost shows like a detach from how actual games are played. And it's like this weird, I'm going to call it like Second Life, but like this weird like Second Life development going on that is at odds with the actual game that people are trying to play.
Yeah, it kind of seems like there's competing principles on one. We want to create this perfect simulation world and have it beautiful and have it very realistic. And on the other, we want to have a game people can go shoot each other with these ships that they're selling. And those kind of don't jive too well. I mean, when you actually want to try to be the game aspect of it, it's gonna just be very abrasive with the let's make everything as realistic as possible. Like there's something's got to give there, and right now it's kind of certain things give in some places, and it doesn't seem like there's like a clear vision for what is this game? Is this a game where you're going to go spend a couple hours with a friend and have a cool space adventure, or is this going to be I want to immerse myself in space reality, or is this whole thing just selling an engine? That's kind of
Yes.
my impression as well. Is that like none of this may actually come to fruition because the only thing they're doing is creating a cool engine that someone else is going to take this technology and make an actual game out of it, and they're just showing off what they can do. So it's I'm not so sure. I don't really know what the answer is. I mean, I guess only they know. So maybe this is all by design because that's their goal. But I hope that's not their goal. I hope their goal is they're going to create a cool engine and create a very fun game on top of it because then that will make the engine much more marketable on top of it. So that's where
I
I'm kind of picturing this.
I believe that you're correct. I think that it's both. I think there's an engine for renewed income, and I also think that they're making a game. They obviously they're making a game. The realism. So the realism thing, and if you guys are still listening, this is a very generalistic episode, but we're going to kind of go bits and bobs. But the realism thing that people keep talking about is something that I always feel holds games back. It's the limit of realism, and there seems to be this strange, I would call it erroneous belief that Star Citizen is meant to be a realistic game, that it's meant to be a simulator. And the confusion I think that people have is when they hear simulator, it is called a space sim, but it's not a space sim in that, again, you're playing that Second Life world space sim. It is a space game with simulated elements, but it's not meant to be realistic. If you really think about it, there's nothing realistic about Star Citizen. You pull G's that would turn you into mush. Obviously you respawn. You don't have to eat very much, thank God. There's a lot of things in a game that aren't realistic, and that's fine. And I believe that when you have a bad system and people try to use realism to argue for that bad system, they're just hurting the game. I don't want to play a realistic game. Realism doesn't make for a good game. It never, unless the game is specifically built for it, which Star Citizen is not. But unless it's built for realism, it doesn't mesh. It doesn't fix. You can't have a game where you are beholden to the laws of reality 900 years in the future in space. The whole idea of being a futuristic space game is to give yourself creative freedom and liberty to make good gameplay decisions and gameplay changes that will just make the game more fun to play. So no, I don't think it makes any sense at all to limit yourself to realism. You can have authenticity and you could have a degree of believability, but you just cannot live by realism. Sometimes things have to be done for gameplay, and that has to trump realism.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could put on a little, I guess, developer perspective hat for a moment, when your paycheck is kind of tied to the success of a game, you get a different perspective on some of this stuff. Like in the case of not really Star Citizen, but what, ultimately, when you want a game to be financially successful, the root of it is fun. You need people engaged with the game. You want them playing. You want them excited about it. You want them telling all their friends about it. You want them to come in and play the game. You want them to keep playing their game. You want them to stay playing as long as possible and to participate in the world. And earlier when I mentioned like you're not content for anybody, I wasn't meaning that derogatory. I mean, from my perspective, an MMO players are the content. Like interacting with other people is the content, and the game is sort of like just setting the stage for you to participate in that content. So the more people you have participating, the more content you're generating, the more things you can do, the more fun experiences you have, the more people talk about the cool stuff that happens in the game. But all that is really hinged on the game being enjoyable and being fun. And I think that has to be like the number one goal. If your purpose is actually to create a fun game that you want to be sustained for many, many years, well, you have to pay the developers. And Star Citizen's model right now appears to be basically perpetual Kickstarter. But at some point, I expect that they'll transition to, hey, we have a game that's fun to play, like Squadron 42, like a real game that comes out and uses the engine and shows off what it can do. And the PU is like more of a perpetual revenue for them to continually develop and create more fun experiences and create more cool stuff in the space world. And from a developer perspective, I think that most of the developers probably want the game to generate good revenue and be fun to play to keep people engaged and coming back. And like, I guess if they're not financially, tied to the game, maybe they don't care about that. Maybe they just I want to create the perfect space simulator or something like that. But I would think most developers have an eye for their own financial future and are probably wanting the game to be as fun as possible so it can be as successful as possible and so it can get continued game development. And that's something I think most players don't really understand is that when a game doesn't do well financially, you make cuts and people move to other projects or they get laid off. And that doesn't help create new content for your game. That hurts the content creation of the game and causes them to be even more laser focused on revenue and generating revenue because they're trying to prevent a sinking ship. And so I like it when I see a game that doesn't really seem like it's in trouble financially. And that means the game is fun, it's engaged, it has a good revenue model, people keep coming in and playing. And so the developers can spend that time investing in things that make the game more fun instead of trying to just keep their heads above water.
It gives you a lot more wiggle room whenever you have a sound financial base to develop things that might not necessarily generate revenue or be focused on generating revenue directly and generates more gameplay. And that is, I don't think people realize that. You said that, and I definitely don't think people understand that. It's easy to look at Star Citizen and point at the revenue and go, oh yeah, the money, money, money. Everybody knows about the money. But whenever you're making a game, and if the game is not fun, people aren't going to play. And if people aren't going to play, then you just don't have a game. And that's why when I was going off about master modes, which I still to this day go off about, and I talk about skills floors and skill ceilings and skill gaps and all this, people go, oh, you're just, you're arguing for bads. And listen, I'm probably one of the better FPS players out there in most games, even, if I'm a bit older. But I know that what's best for me is probably not what's best for the majority of the people playing the game. And if I like the game, if the people that I'm beating aren't somehow having fun, then I'm not going to have a game to play very long. So that's why when I make these arguments and I talk about these things, I do say, well, is Joe Average going to enjoy this? Is Joe Average going to have fun here? Is he going to be able to take a beating and walk away from it and go, yeah, I took some lumps, but I learned what I did there. And if I try a bit harder, I can improve and I can start beating that guy. That's what I'm looking for. And that's what the old system, what Master Modes wasn't doing without Master Modes. And that's kind of what Master Modes is aiming to do. But I think now with 3.23 coming, we're seeing a lot more changes that are geared towards accessibility and player skill being, it's still important, but it's a bit easier to comprehend. People call it a skill floor. I don't know. I hate all that. It's basically easier to get into. It's easy to learn, difficult to master. That's basically what I'm saying here. And a part of that is a lot of the abstract changes. And abstractions such as you pull the magazines out of your backpack without having a high fidelity animation. Or abstractions like you're loading your magazines. You don't see your magazines being loaded, but they're being loaded. There's nothing wrong with that. Do you guys really want to see the hands loading the mags? Yeah, it might be cool, but does it really add to the game? No, it takes away developer time from something else, and I could use my imagination or, in general, not care, because if I'm in a PvP fight and I've got to pack magazines with fresh rounds of ammo, I really don't care how it looks. I just want it to happen as quick as possible so I can reload my weapon and fight back. And that's how most players are going to look at it. So while the fidelity is good and all these very highly developed and nice looking systems, they look good, do they really make the game more fun? And in some cases they don't. If they don't, what is their purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that gets back to accessibility because, you with the master modes especially, when you get into accessibility, the more accessible the game is, the more people you're going to be able to hop into the game and enjoy it and play it and feel like they're being successful in the game and want to come back and keep playing that game and learn to get better and actually master it. And when you have like a really steep learning curve, like EVE Online, for example, I mean, people suffer through that and they figure it out. And, sure, they understand it at that point. But there's a lot of people along that road who just looked at the game and are like, nope, this is too complicated. This is I'm not good enough to play this game in the case of like a very, very realistic, combat simulator. That when you're getting back to make a game that's successful that people want to play and stay engaged in, you can't just make that game for like 0.001% of the population. You want a game that, maybe 10% of the population could pick up the game and feel like, hey, this is cool. I want to play this. Even if they're not very good at it, they want to feel like they have a chance. Even if they're not very good at it, they want to feel like, hey, I can learn this, and this is something I can see myself getting better at. And that leads into more people playing the game becoming more alive, more content, more stories, more people coming back, more revenue generation for the game, and more development. It's just like a big positive feedback loop that just makes everybody happy. It makes the developers happy, makes the players happy, and everything else. And it does seem like there's like a portion of the population of the fan base who's just like really invested in a very, very narrow vision of the game, not accounting for times changing since the vision might have been initially created, not accounting for the fact that it's a game that needs to be fun in order for it to be successful. It can't be just successful for 5 people that really appreciate it. It needs more than that.
There is this idea that if you dumb a game down, and this is not dumbing down, I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about dumbing something down. Accessibility and dumbing down are not the same thing. But there's this idea that if you make a game more accessible or easier to understand initially, that you're hurting its longevity. Again, this is not 10 years ago or more. Players now have choices of games to go play. If one game right now is just not scratching my itch, or it's annoying me, or it's just not fun, I can go play any other game. There's tons of games on Steam. A lot of them now are space games. There's a variety of other MMOs to go pick of various levels of quality. The point here is I can go play something else. You don't want your players to ever be tempted to go and play something else. You have to compete for their attention, and you're competing for their attention, and you're competing for their time, and you want to prove that your product is a better product than theirs. So when I was going at the master modes thing, and I still go at it, I've always went at it from this point of view of, okay, Arena Commander, why is it dead? Why is it the same like 100 people all the time? Okay, that's who the game appeals to. Well, what about everybody else? And that, I think, is something that CIG picked up on because master modes came to be. And it's absolutely easier. Anybody who tells you that it's not easier is a liar. But that's kind of the point. The point is it's meant to be easier. And it's still got a long ways to go. You've got people out there trying to disparage the system and say it should be reverted back. Those people need to wake up and smell the coffee. It's not going back. You don't put that much developer time and capital on a new system to scrap it and throw it away because some YouTuber doesn't friggin' like it. That's just not how it works. So Master Modes is going to be here and stay. But it's understanding not just in particular Master Modes, but what it represents. And it represents a step towards that accessibility. And I want to see that level of accessibility extend to other parts of the game. Again, not dumbing it down, not making it for, baby's first space game, nothing crazy like that, nothing emotional like that, but making it more accessible, cutting out a lot of the fat, and just making the game overall better and more approachable.
That's pretty much my take on it. Is I think that it's the flight model is dated. It's not particularly fun. I think things move way too fast when I'm in there, and if I don't have the right techniques and everything, I don't stand a chance to do anything, and I'm not going to give a game like that too much time to try to figure out subtle nuances and that sort of thing. Now, some people are going to want to do that, but some people are going to do that for any system, no matter what it is. They're going to just like drill in and become absolute masters of it. And I think in this particular situation, you have people who've already done that with the old system, and they've already have that massive investment in that system, and they don't want to see it change because they put so much time, so much effort into it, so much they've built around it that it's very threatening when something like that is going to change, and they're not going to like it no matter what the change is or whether it's for a really good reason or what it is. They're just all of the effort that they put in for that system is effectively going to be tossed out the window. And I recognize that's got to suck. That doesn't feel good. It feels like, hey, I did that, but that happens with every game. Like, the way a class in WoW plays now is very different from the way they played 5 years ago. And every game is going to evolve and change, and you kind of got to keep up with it. And you can't really expect that, mastering one particular version or, implementation of something and then not expect it to ever change. I don't think that's very realistic, and I don't think it's healthy for the game.
There, and I can relate to it. And I've played a games. I don't like personally talking about World of Warcraft very much. I hate that game, but going to that particular example of mastering something that was then changed. I was very good at RPGs, and I was the de facto top-rated warrior in North America for RPGs. And I guess it also extended to Australia because they were on our servers too. Anyway, anywho, there was a change from Mists of Pandaria to, I think it was Warlords of Draenor. They drastically cut down on the buttons. They changed the way the classes worked, and they made the game, PvP in particular, far more accessible. I hated the idea. I couldn't stand it. And I couldn't stand it because I could no longer 2v1, 3v1, 2v5 with a healer. It wasn't possible anymore. And it sucked for me. It was an ego check. But I still succeeded, and I still did well, and I still had the highest ratings. But also, I had a lot more opponents to fight, and the game was overall better because there were more enemies and teammates to fight with and against. And it's kind of what you have going in, I think, with Master Modes and Star Citizen, or at least what the idea and the goal is behind it. So I get the players that put a lot of the time in there and the investment, but there's something a little bit different about putting time into Star Citizen to get good versus other games. Because you have to not just put time in to get good, you have to be able to tolerate some of the most unstable, buggy, garbage gameplay out there to actually then put the time in. The simple act of equipping your ship in Arena Commander for years was a Herculean effort. It just didn't work. And so you have to be very unique to do that and to be able to put up with that every freaking day, then to go into AC and then put up with that every day just to get good. Most games don't have that first step of just getting the damn thing to work. Star Citizen's got that problem. And I don't think people really think about that when they think about the accessibility of, okay, I want to practice, but then I got to jump through all these technical hoops, limitations, and in a lot of cases, very poor gameplay decisions just to actually start playing and practicing.
I think it's a very good example of how, you can put a lot of time into something and then it really sucks when it changes, but the change is still good and you still have some really positive things out of it. Like, I think making Star Citizen more accessible to more people is just in general going to be much better. I've talked to people about the game. A lot of people, if they don't think it's a real game, they'll say, I don't have all the fancy flight controls and things like that to be able to play that game and really perform. And they're kind of like turned off just by the I don't want to say aura of complexity, but just like the almost the reputation of it already is what they're turned off by. And I think having something that's just a better system for newer players, especially, you're going to get more people in the game. You're going to get more people spending time in the game, and then you're going to have just a better game. You're going to have a healthier community, and that sort of gets back into I think just the accessibility concept in general, but also applying it to things not just the flight model, but also just like playing with my friend. Like if I wanted to hop in and play with my friend for 30 minutes, I can't do it in Star Citizen. I can't. And that's one of the reasons I think like the respawn system has got to change. Like it has to be accessible, and they're making these big changes in master modes in the flight model, and I hope that that's a really good sign of a philosophy change that they want to make the game in general more accessible. And I hope that they're going to, look at the spawn system and look at the philosophy behind respawning, and particularly with the goal of keeping people engaged with their activities. Like whatever activity I was doing before I died, like get me back to that as soon as possible. Get me back to my friends as soon as possible, that I can resume doing things on them and not have like a death or a ship being blown up being a death sentence to my play session, because that's what it is right now. you blow up, I'm just gonna log out. I have to start all over again anyway. What's the point?
You got something better to do, and players, they do. They'll go do something better. And we
Hmm.
could dedicate an entire next episode to respawn mechanics, and that's would probably be
Hmm.
pretty good because it's a big topic and it's worth talking
Hmm.
about. But it's also worth even briefly mentioning here because it's one of many accessibility issues. And
Yep.
I'm not going to just talk about technical. I'm going to anytime I talk about accessibility in general, I'm not talking about technical problems. I'm just talking about mechanical or game design theory issues that are impeding the player. Because a lot of times a game feels, and we touched on this much earlier, it's like a tedium simulator. And you should not want tedium in your game. Time can be fun, and doing things that are tedious can also be made fun. That might be tedious to the onlooker, right? But to the person doing it, it may actually be fun. And there are ways to do that, whether it's salvage or mining. Those are examples of time consuming things that might look tedious to other people, but they're fun and they're engaging experiences because while you are, if you look at it from a very basic, literal, standpoint, you're just there scraping hole and moving your mouse left and right, okay? But it's still fun and people do it. And that's a good example of time. But there's nothing fun about a lot of the other stuff that's just a chore. And the chores are what bother me, the equipping of the gear and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The gear is a really big one. I think back to just PlanetSide One's system was pretty good. You spawn in a spawn tube, you got a basic gun, some very basic equipment, and like 10 feet away is a terminal. You can go grab the loadout of your choice, and with a button press, you are in that gear, ready to go. And it's almost, as quick as swapping loadouts in like Star Marine or something. I'm ready to go. I have all my gear, and I'm out the door, and I'm playing the game. And it's such a chore to like get into anything. If I want to like do some ground activity, all right, I got my Corsair, I got my equipment, go buy all my stuff, go drag my stuff onto my character, make sure I have the ammo, make sure I have this med kits, make sure I got tractor beam, make sure I got all the armor I need, make sure I have enough magazines of the right type for the, however many different guns that I have. And then I need to call up my Corsair and then hop in the Corsair and fly down to a planet, go to a mining station, land, hop out, go grab my vehicle that I want to do on the ground, and then throw that in the back, then take off, and then I can start going to where I want to go or do what I want to do. And if I bump a landing or I'm not paying attention or for whatever reason I make some mistake somewhere, I start that whole process over again, and it's frustrating.
And that's a logout. And that's that's it. That
Yeah, it's a
whole process.
logout.
Yeah, exactly. That whole process is so long. I gotta be honest with you guys. I play Arena Commander now almost exclusively. I hate to say it. I cannot stomach logging into the PU. Bugs aside, it's what the PU represents to me currently that is just so boring and tedious. I don't want to do it. I don't want to call the ship, fly the. You don't even call the ship. It's just everything that goes involved. It's not just calling a ship. It's everything like he just mentioned. It's all that stuff puts me off to the game. And I don't have this desire to play the game just because I'm a backer. The money is not. I don't have that with a sunk cost fallacy. I don't have that. I just want the game to be fun. I don't care how little or how much I or anybody spends on it. But I cannot be forced into the game no matter what because I just think about the daunting tasks ahead of me that I have to do checklist of things, of chores that I got to do just so I can start playing. And then, like he said, if I die, I got to do it all over again. So I just jump in AC. People might go, oh, then Star Citizen is not the game for you. Well, then Star Citizen is not the game for anybody. If that is what
Yeah.
is expected, if I can't do it, if me, okay, a backer who loves the game, does not want to do that, anybody else who has no real massive investment in it is going to want to do it either. So then who's your
Yeah.
player base going to be? Who's going to play the game? Who is going to, again, be the content for the game? A bunch of freaking NPCs standing on chairs? Come on, get real.
Yeah. It's so hard to do stuff, and it's like you really have to be sort of invested in the game to put up with it. And I think that's where a lot of the population is. It's just they put so much into the game that, you put up with it. You learn to deal with it, and you make excuses for it.
Yeah, you guys can like the game and not make excuses for it. I still like the game. I do. I genuinely do. I do like playing it when I play it. I wish I could play it more. I like the game so much that I wish I could play it more. Think about that. That's what I want to do. I want to play the game. But the game often works against me so that I can't play it. So I go to the path of least resistance, which is Arena Commander, and I log in there and I start playing. That's not what I signed up for, but that's what I do. But AC has taught me a lot of things, not talking about skill-wise, but if you could get some concepts and some accessibility from AC into the PU, that is ultimately what I do want to see. I want an AC-like experience into PU, meaning, again, we'll have a whole video about that, like spawn points. But again, spawn points, the concept of getting into action, doing things, the loadouts, all that stuff you have in AC, I just want to see that into PU. So, Malorn, this has been kind of introductory. We don't want to keep it too long. Next time we do this, I definitely do want to kind of have a more focused structure going on and talking about specific things. Like I said, next time we're going to do respawns, we'll talk about economy, whatever it may be. But the last thing I kind of want to do here to kind of close this up, this introductory podcast, is what is it about Star Citizen, the first one, that you love, and the second that you hate?
I think I love just the fact that this game has no themes. Like, there's no loading screens. How the world is basically just a complete world, and traveling around it. I mean, it's truly amazing. Like the technical achievement of this game is really amazing, and that's the thing that I like the most about it. I think that has a bright future because of that. And the thing that I hate the most about it is how much it wastes my time, and how much I think that it's very likely to squander, the good things for the sake of stuff that doesn't really matter.
That's a very good answer. And I could sum mine up by, I love what it could be, but I hate what it is. It's that simple. But if you guys have listened, I appreciate it. Leave us some comments below. Maybe give us some ideas of things you'd like to hear us talk about. Next time we do this, don't have any real set dates on it. We are going to probably go ahead and probably address respawns, kind of talk a bit in depth about that in general, why it's a big deal. I think it would be a very beneficial conversation to have. But yeah, this was just an introduction. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you, Malorn, for being here.
Sure thing.
All right, and we'll see you guys next time.